So let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. So total domestic box office was a little more than 170 million, so which constituted about a 40% drop, which makes sense considering last week was so large because of Deadpool and Wolverine. So this is still a very impressive, like one of the better weekends of the year still, even though it's like a nearly 50% drop, right? Opening this week, we have the M. Night Shyamalan film Trap, which I thought the trailer looked really great, but apparently reviews have been very mixed about it. And people must have been hearing the bad word of mouth about it because it opened in third place, which of course was going to happen. It's going up against Deadpool, Wolverine, and Twisters, which we'll talk about. It's still going pretty strong. But Trap only opened to about a little under $16 million. And I had projected this to open around 20 to 24 million. So it couldn't even meet those projections, right? And this brings its worldwide total now to 20 million, but it was made for like $30 million, right? So in this first weekend, it still hasn't even crossed that initial threshold of making back the budget. But of course, as we know, you really need to double the budget, right? So this is a little bit of a disappointment. The thing about M. Night Shyamalan's films, at least his kind of like renaissance, is that they don't make a ton of money, but they're cheap and they make a good profit. So let's see if this, is able to maybe grow a little bit. But again, the word of mouth to me reads that it's not going to get a bunch of butts into the theater. Also opening this week at number 6, couldn't even make it into the top 5, was the live action, why it exists, I don't know, the live action Harold and the Purple Crayon, with a film with Zachary Levi, only opening to about 6 million, and I had projected around 7 to 11, so it's just under that, just under that threshold, but again, still fell short, right? I think you're going to see here, Deadpool and Wolverine is really sucking a lot of the oxygen, kind of like we talked about with Inside Out 2 for a couple weeks. It kind of, this is a big weekend if you look at that total up at the top in blue, but most of that is coming from just one movie, right? And if you look between Deadpool and Wolverine and Twisters, Deadpool and Wolverine opened to about 97 million. This just in its second weekend, and Twisters only brought in a little under 23 million, right? So there's a big gap. But going back to Harold and his crayon, this, is definitely disappointing. The film from I thought it was a bad idea in concept, and then I saw the trailer and was like, oh, good God, this looks like it's 20 years old, yet somehow being released. Like, it was like they filmed it 20 years ago, and they're just releasing it now. Like, it seems so dated, so outdated. So this brings its worldwide total, as you can see here, to about 9 million. But it was made for like $40 million. That's insane. Probably for salaries for Zachary Levi, for Zooey Deschanel. So not only has this not made it back, at least Trap, it's basically at, well, what is it? It's a negative 33% return. This is a negative 77.5% return. So this is not doing well for them. And again, I don't see this growing over time. So this one, we can officially label this one a dud. Also opening, we have a random indie film I hadn't heard of. The Firing Squad opened to about 1.6 million. And that constitutes both its domestic and worldwide total. I literally know next to nothing about this, but again, I think we've been seeing this, that because you have movies, something like Deadpool and Wolverine is sucking the oxygen out of all of the other, like, mainstream blockbuster movies. So it kind of gives smaller movies like this the chance to kind of squeak into the top 10. Because they're counter-programming, right? They're not... Deadpool... People going to see The Firing Squad are not going to go see these other movies, right? That opened at number 8. And then also at number 10, Ponyo, right? The Studio Ghibli film. This is for Studio Ghibli Fest that Fathom Events does. I should have taken out the divide... Oh, no, I think I did. No? I don't know. I think I have some... left some formulas in error here. But this is like what they do every year. Fathom Events will like re-release the Ghibli movies in theaters. So again, it's reinforcing this point. The fact that this 15-plus-year-old movie being re-released through like a special events distributor, only making around $800,000. The fact that that could squeak into the top 10 speaks to, again, Deadpool and Wolverine's prominence, right? So yeah, again, looking at it, it's held its first place spot in its second weekend, bringing in $97 million, which is a bigger drop than I was expecting, though. And it is about a 54% drop, which is bigger than ideal, but A, not awful, and B, perhaps that makes sense just because it opened so big, right? It just had this huge opening that you weren't gonna get. Like Deadpool and Wolverine is fast food, right? And my review for it is actually coming out tomorrow on cinemaincusto.substack.com, which is where you should go check out my reviews for new movies. But my kind of feeling about this movie is it's popcorn. It's just entertainment for entertainment's sake, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but not necessarily a good thing either. So I feel like audiences, when you go, you're not going to have as much repeat viewings. You're still going to get a bunch. Like, you don't make this much money in your second weekend unless you're getting a bunch of repeat viewers, right? But I don't think you're going to have as much as opposed to a film that had a stronger emotional core. But it did add 20 theaters, which is interesting. And this, has the biggest, the most, the biggest per theater average for any of these movies here. We also have, taking a look at their totals, right, Deadpool and Wolverine's totals. This brings its domestic total to about $396 million and $824 million worldwide. I believe it's the most successful R-rated film ever so far. That's not true. Like one of the biggest openings or biggest second day weekends or something. And again, this is all just off of a $200 million budget. So in just 2 weekends, it's brought in a 312% return on investment, right? So that's very, again, kind of like with Inside Out 2, what are the implications going to be for the industry? It's still up in the air. My money is on that they're going to take the wrong lessons from this. But in any case, I'm sure Marvel is breathing a sigh of relief. Looking at number 2 now, we have Twisters in its second place, holding second place in its third weekend, bringing in about $22.5 million for the weekend, and this constituted a 35% drop. Lost about 161 theaters. And if you're looking here, we've been kind of keeping an eye on this movie because it's having trouble getting to that double the budget threshold, right? So it was made for roughly $175 million, and it's only made $196 million domestically and $274 million worldwide. So it's crossed that initial threshold, but it really needs to get to that other threshold. So right now it's only about 56% return, which Hollywood does not like to see. They want to see those triple-digit returns. Also, still in the top 5, we have Despicable Me 4, dropping from 3rd to 4th in its 5th weekend, bringing in just a little over $11 million, about a 23% drop. So again, this is holding. And the fact that this is above Inside Out has been interesting. But I guess Despicable Me 4 did open after, but even still, I'm not a huge fan of Inside Out 2, and I haven't seen Despicable Me 4. But I would imagine audiences prefer Inside Out 2. But Despicable Me 4 fills a niche that Inside Out 2 filled. But, that movie has been out for almost 2 months now, right? So this brings its domestic total to about $314 million domestically and $752 million worldwide off of just a $100 million budget. So again, that's a very good rate of return, 652%. Very, very successful for Illumination. And then, like I just mentioned, still in the top 5, number 5, dropping from 4th to 5th in its 8th weekend, Inside Out 2. Just, again, at this point, it's just about every little bit counts now. So it only brought in about $6.7 million, but it was only a 22% drop, right? So it's still it's still holding out and still milking American audiences for as much as they can. This brings its domestic total to about 627 million, and 1.6 billion with a B off of just a $200 million budget. So again, very, very successful, both in terms of just pure dollars and also as a rate of return off of that budget. And then, interestingly, you have Longlegs, right? The horror film from Neon, dropping from 5th to 7th in its 4th frame. It brought in just a little over $4 million for the weekend, about a 39% drop. This brings its domestic total to about $67 million and worldwide total to about $79 million. But off of just a $10 million budget. So while Inside Out 2, has, I don't know what the exact math would be, but has made, 10 or 15 times as much money, the rate of return is better, at least right now. And the rate of return is probably, that's even better considering most of their money here is coming from domestic sales, whereas Inside Out, looking at it here, it looks like less than half of its worldwide box office is coming from American theaters, right? And typically, studios like that they'll make more money if it's in the United States, like the profit, the revenue sharing with the theaters, right? So this has a better rate of return, right? And this speaks to what I've always said, that you should, instead of making one $200 million movie, you should just make like 10 $20 million movies or 20 $10 million movies. So that way, it's not just about giving filmmakers more opportunities to be creative and express and create new, interesting films. That's how I feel. But even if you're just a cynical Hollywood businessman, it hedges your bets. You might not make as much money off of one film, but if something doesn't do well, it doesn't bring down the whole studio, right? So that's a very good rate of return. And then lastly, looking here, A Quiet Place Day 1 is also still in the top 10, dropping from 6th to 9th in its sixth weekend, bringing in about 1.4 million. But pretty big drop, though, like a 55% drop. Lost, it looks like almost half of all of its theaters. But again, it's still a decent return on investment. So it's 137 million domestically, 259 million worldwide, off just a $67 million budget. So again, not gangbusters like an Inside Out or even on the other spectrum like Longlegs, but still definitely serviceable. And you need films like that to kind of, again, hedge your bets and keep the business model moving.